This video will be my midterm review of the 2019 Giant Revolt. So this is the Revolt Zero, and I've been riding this bike for about 2.5 months. Let's start the review by talking about the models. So Giant used to offer the Revolt in an alloy model. They've upped their game for 2019 for their Revolt, which is now their full-on gravel bike, and currently they're only offering this in a carbon model. So there are 3 models of this, the Zero, and the 1 and the 2. The Revolt 1 comes with a 1x drivetrain, and the Revolt 2 is Shimano 105 that has hydraulic disc brakes, but it uses a cable. So you're using a standard 105 mechanical shifter with Giant brakes. Now, I've never used those brakes, but personally I like as few cables as possible on my bike. I like a full hydraulic system. So if you want a 2x with full hydraulic brakes, this is your only model. I've said it before in some of my videos, I always recommend a 2x system for gravel because you don't get that big jump between gears in the back. So let's start by talking about the components, and the Shimano Ultegra on this has been absolutely flawless. I love this new Ultegra. Personally, I will never go back to SRAM road brakes unless they do a major overhaul. I've had SRAM road on a gravel bike and a couple cyclocross race bikes, and I've always had problems with the pads dragging on the rotors. I'll get them centered, I think they're perfect, then they start rubbing again a couple rides later. It's the most annoying thing. These Shimano hydraulic brakes have been absolutely perfect. The shifting on this bike is flawless. I've never had a front derailleur shift as quick as this new Ultegra. And so this spec for me, this is the perfect spec for a gravel bike. If you can swing the cash for the Revolt Zero, you're going to get the best components. Giant have done a pretty good job with the cockpit on this bike, building in compliance. So I'll repeat something that I've said in another video. The 3 main things that I look for in a gravel bike are comfort. I also look for a bike that's going to be relatively quick, and I want a bike that's stable or a bike that handles well. This is a diffuse handlebar, so it's Giant's kind of own brand of building in a little bit of flex into a handlebar, and also the seat post. So this handlebar, if you put the front tire down and push down, you can feel the handlebar flex a little bit. So it gives some compliance to kind of smooth out some bumps when you're riding. The handlebar has a little bit of flair to it, so it's kind of maybe hard to see in the video, but the drops flare out a little bit, and also the bar bends a little bit. And I actually really like the shape of this handlebar. Some other flared bars that I've used will have a really angled top, and so the handlebars, the shifters kind of come in and they put your hands closer together. This kind of does the opposite. So you can see the bend kind of comes out, and that puts the hoods, the shifters wider, and gives you, I think, a better riding position when you're riding on the hoods, which is where I ride most of the time when I'm riding gravel. The only downside to that bend coming out, and it's very minor, but when you mount something like a Garmin to the front, it makes it just a tad crooked if you're using the out front mount, which is what I like to use when riding gravel. Giant's diffuse seat post also has a little bit of flex to it, and I find this seat post actually flexes a little bit more than the diffuse seat post on my cyclocross race bike, which is a Giant TCX, because of this sloping top tube. And what that does is it allows more seat posts to extend out of the frame, and so that allows the seat post to flex. This saddle is fairly comfortable. I am probably going to replace this saddle with a WTB Silverado. Saddles are so personal. For me, I found the WTB Silverado to be one of the most comfortable saddles that I've used. This one will start to hit some pressure points after 50, 60 miles. It's not too bad. I've used saddles that are much worse. This one is light, and I love the fact that it has the anatomical cutout. I could keep this one on and be fine. I just know how much I really like the WTB Silverado, and that's probably the only component that I'll replace on this bike. I think I'm going to keep everything else stock. Now let's talk about the wheels on this bike with the rims and the tires. So obviously these are carbon rims. I've said that in my first look video. I'll say something that I said in other videos, and that is I still prefer alloy wheels on a gravel bike. It's kind of cool that Giant can put carbon rims on a bike that's $3,400. I still like the smoothness of an alloy rim. That being said, I do like the fact that I can run lower tire pressure with a carbon rim. I don't have to worry about dinging the rim if I were to hit something really hard, so I can run those lower tire pressures. And I feel like I have to run a little bit lower tire pressures in order to have more compliance. Another nice thing about the carbon is the fact that they are lighter than most alloy rims. And also these accelerate really well. So if you're using this bike on group rides where there's people attacking and you just want to get out of the saddle and sprint, or going up a climb, I mean, these are going to climb really well because of the stiffness and also the lower weight. And of course, if you're racing gravel, then the carbon rims are going to be really fast for racing. I like the tread pattern on these Giant crosscut tires. They do feel a little bit heavy. And I tried to find the weight of these tires, and the only ones that I could find were some on a Canadian Giant website, and they were listed at 705 grams. It didn't say if they were the Crosscut 1 or 2. These are the Crosscut Gravel 1 tires. And so, you know, like I said, they feel a little bit heavier than like the Schwalbe G1s or the Maxxis Ramblers that I've used a lot in the past. I know the Maxxis Ramblers are somewhere around 400 grams, 4 to 450. And so if that weight that I found is correct, these are 250 plus grams heavier than like a Maxxis Rambler. So if weight is a major concern, you may want to look at replacing these. Like I said, to me, they just feel a little bit heavy. That being said, they do roll smooth and they are pretty compliant. So it's a nice rolling tire, like I said. The only complaint that I've had with this bike is the fact that these tires lose air overnight. And when I say lose air, we're talking 5 PSI or more overnight. I haven't had a problem with air leaking out on a ride, so you're okay on a ride, but I don't like having to pump up my tires every single time I head out for a ride. I don't know if it's the rim strip, the valve. You know, the valve stems are tight. It does it with both the front and the rear. And I've used these valves, these rims on my cyclocross race bike. It's the exact same wheel set, just a different tire. So maybe it's the tire. I do have Stan's sealant. I even put some race sealant, so the Stan's race formula in the front tire, and it's still leaking a little bit. I'm like, it's been, I think I rode this bike yesterday or 2 days ago, and that's how much air came out in 2 days. When I do my long-term review, I may put some Maxxis Ramblers on these wheels and just see if they don't leak like that. That's the only complaint I've had of this bike. Now we'll talk about the ride quality, which to me is the most important thing of a gravel bike. Like I said, comfort is very important. So comfort, as I mentioned, comes through the handlebars and the seat post, but also of course the frame. This frame does have compliance built into it, and the frame will smooth out the chatter and the bumps of a gravel road without being too sloppy as far as acceleration. So this bike is plenty stiff when you're accelerating, when you're climbing out of the saddle, when you're accelerating out of a corner. This bike, it'll move, but yet it still has that compliance built into the frame. This bike has a little bit longer wheelbase than some other gravel bikes that I've ridden, and that longer wheelbase makes for a very stable ride. The steering on this bike doesn't feel quite as floppy at low speeds as other gravel bikes that I've ridden. I really like that. So I like the fact that the front end is pretty agile. So when you're going down a gravel road and you've got to avoid a pothole or make a quick maneuver, the steering is very light and very quick. But like I said, with that longer wheelbase, the frame is also very stable at high speeds. So I guess the theme of this bike is a bike that is compliant, it is comfortable, but it's also quick and accelerates well without feeling sluggish. So that'll wrap up my midterm review of the Giant Revolt. Overall, very happy with this bike. This is an excellent gravel bike. I'll link some of the other videos that I've done when I first got this bike, the first look, a first ride. I'll put those in the description below if you want to go check that out. I go into more detail of the frame and the components. Like I said, the Shimano Ultegra is great. The tires are the only issue that I've had with leaking air. They ride nice. I just wish they would hold air better overnight. When I do my long-term review of this bike, I'll let you know if I found a remedy. Overall, the ride quality of the bike is exactly what I look for in a gravel bike. Great handling, great comfort, and a bike that's really fast. So questions, comments that you have about this review, drop those below. If you've ridden a Giant Revolt, whether it be a demo or owning one, I'd love to know your thoughts as well, so leave those in the comments. Thanks for watching.